All right, folks, good evening. And it is that time of the week. It is Thursday, the 26th of August. Hope you're having a safe and productive week so far. I'm Anthony Weeks and reporting for the Caribbean America's Single Economy Initiative, a SETI initiative. This is the case report in news. And this evening, we're going to take a look at envisioning as a continuation from the discussion we had yesterday on the topic of having a more smarter infrastructure. Today we're going to have a presentation by one of our strategic media alliance partners, Carib Nation TV, on the issue of smart future. And this focus more on the human aspect of it, the human element of as we look towards the future and having a smarter future. This is Envisioning Caribbean Smart Future. And what is exactly is a smart future? And there's a couple of definitions that kind of encapsulates it or crystallize it for us. But let me just share a couple of references. A smart future is where people can search for and eventually find intelligent solution to these issues in collaboration with others, in support of governments or other entities, or even alone by applying available technologies and knowledge. A more in-depth definition of what smart future is: a goal. The goal of Smart Future Initiative is to establish a forum and a network for triggering, developing, and communicating innovative ideas and concept, as well as providing expertise on technology developments and trends determining our current and future life in a fast changing society. While the emphasis is on trends and development in information and communication between technology, our work is grounded in a multi and interdisciplinary approach, considering also social science as well as architecture, design, and art. The overall guideline is a human-centered design approach, respectively, in the application domain of future cities, a citizen-centered design approach, and to keep the human in the loop and in control. This can be achieved by designing for a well-understood human technology symbiosis for reconciling humans and technology. Design trade-offs play an important role for managing the divergent demands for human control and being in the loop versus automated or autonomous systems, as well as usable privacy versus impunate smartness. And it's saying that it's the results of vision of moving beyond smart only cities. And so we had yesterday, we had a focused discussion on smart city technology and Internet of Things and the digital transformation of the region. So tonight is a continuation of a forum of people from the Caribbean talking about the birthing of smart future, the human component of future development and advancement of technology. And this evening, we are going to hear a presentation by our media partner, Carib Nation TV, this is a rebroadcast of a program that they did, and we're going to feature them on this program on the case report, so you get to hear a collection or a collective voices on the subject matter of, how technology is advancing. So let's go straight to the, if you will, let's go straight to the tape so we can hear from the forum, the panel in this forum.
And welcome to Carib Nation. I'm Claudette Lindsay, host of this special edition on the United Nations World Humanitarian Day. The theme for this year is #TheHumanRace, which is a global challenge for climate action in solidarity with people who need it most. And I must say, Humanitarian Day is an extremely important day considering all that is happening in our world today. My co-host is Terry Finisterre, who is joining us from St. Lucia. Hello, Terry. It's good to have a fellow journalist joining us from the region.
Good evening, Claudette. Pleasure to be here with you and pleasure to be part of this esteemed group this evening.
We are going to have a conversation with Dr. Claire Nelson about her book, Smart Futures, and its relevance to Humanitarian Day. Terry?
Good evening again to everyone, and certainly a very pleasant good evening to you, Dr. Nelson. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Dr. Nelson, a really exciting project, and I'm really delighted that you invited me to be part of it. Looking at the book, looking at what's coming soon from you, you were invited to be part of this Future series. First of all, tell us a little bit about what the Future series is all about. I know we're going to be delving a little bit into it with Tim, but just briefly.
Well, from my understanding, and Tim is a better person to answer that, yes. The Resetting Our Future series is one of his brainchilds, and he can tell me more about that. That is really about it. I think Tim will tell you, and I hope I'm saying it right, that it came up as a result of the COVID pandemic. Really wanted to think about how can we provide answers in this very complex situation. So he invited me to be a part of the series, and here I am. But he can tell you more about the series and who else and what other books are in the series.
All right. Well, again, we're going to be talking to Tim a little bit in a little while. But why did you think it was something that you wanted to participate in? What drew you in to this concept of the Future series?
Well, I'm a futurist. I practice as a futurist, and I've been doing so ever since I retreaded myself some 10 years ago. And I've been talking a lot about the smart Caribbean, and I've been using the term smart future for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And it came up because I've been saying, everybody's talking about a smart city, smart, books, smart, what else? Watches, smart houses, smart cars. But we're the dumbest things that are out there because we're just operating as if to say there's no tomorrow and it's business as usual. And so I couldn't resist the opportunity to sort of begin to bring my gospel just from my few friends and colleagues who are on this call who have heard me preach it all the time to a wider audience. And I did also believe that as a small island girl, having a voice from the global south would really be very important in this global conversation, because there are not many books written about the future from people from the Caribbean, from Black women, etc. So I think I might be an early pioneer in this genre of thinking about the future and writing about the future in this way.
Okay, so we're going to be coming back to your book in just a little while. Of course, today is also UN Humanitarian Day, as Claudette has framed us earlier on, and we're very concerned about the Caribbean climate agenda. Obviously, very, very relevant to the theme and importance of the book. So as we just segue into segue back to Claudette and to talking with Tim a little bit, just talk to us about how the connection between Humanitarian Day and climate change in your mind and how it was brought together in your book.
Wow. Certainly right now.
I know I'm asking you to summate a lot.
I know, right. But yes, I'm saying because when you think about the millions of people, I think over 200-something million people that are like in the refugee camps or are internally displaced or in some way struggling from climate change, this Humanitarian Day really hits home, especially because it's the COVID era. I mean, people are already supposed to be social distance. How can it be social distance if you're in a camp? In the developing countries, how can you address this issue on top of the fact of no vaccines or few vaccines? How are we really going to come out of this seemingly piling problem on top of problem up on top of problem? And so I do think it behooves all of us in civil society, or the plural society as my book calls us, to partner with private sector, and government in new ways. And that's part of the challenge. I think for too long, the plural sector has been seen as sort of a side arm, and only to be spoken to speak when spoken to, especially in the Caribbean region. And so as we think about climate change, and we think about especially the fact that Caribbean diaspora are so engaged in relief efforts usually, but then we have to be begging and pushing and trying to fight our way in to get information. And that, yes, we're well-meaning, but sometimes we ourselves don't understand all the different issues. I do think it's this moment is right for us to reframe, reset the future of humanitarian concerns, certainly for the Caribbean region, as the whole world begins to look at how we're going to pay for these continuing high digit, 6-7 digit disasters that are happening around the world.
All right, and as I said, we're going to be kicking it back to Claudette and getting greater context on the Resetting Our Future series momentarily. But just before we do that, I have one further question for you, Dr. Nelson. Smart Futures for Flourishing World, a paradigm shift for achieving global sustainability. Obviously this year, World Humanitarian Day concerned with the human race, a global challenge for climate action in solidarity with the people who need it most. Just frame for me that title and what how it resonates for you with the theme of Humanitarian Day this year.
Wow, the human race. When I was coming with a topic for this conversation, I call it Birthing Smart Futures for the Human Race. And it was upon the fact that the book is now being birthed, and this is the baby shower, so to speak. But it's also the fact that we have to birth this new way of thinking so that we can indeed have a human race that continues and that doesn't become self-extinct. A lot of what I talk about in the book is to frame my approach is that I believe, are at a precipice. And so we are heading towards self-extinction by fair means or foul, whether it's nuclear disaster or pandemics gone wild without control, or surpassing the climate boundaries and other planetary boundaries that exist that we already overshot. And so humanitarian, then the word humanitarianism versus humanism versus humanitism, my word, I thought was a good space for me to sort of begin this conversation. I like to think that what I'm doing here is not just having a book, I'm really launching a movement. The idea is that we're going to have 1 million or more people who are using the ideas I have in this book to think about how do you design policy solutions, program solutions, project solutions, product solutions. It's really a design thinking framework. And so the human race, and the pun on the race because we're in a race for survival.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's all very interesting. And there's a lot more to talk about as far as your book is concerned. But I want to just kick it back to Claudette for a moment. And Claudette, I think we certainly want to hear from Tim about the series Resetting Our Futures.
This is Carib Nation. We are having a conversation about the United Nations Humanitarian Day. Also joining us is Tim Ward. He's the publisher of a series of books titled Resetting Our Futures. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Claudette. I'm so happy to be with you and everyone participating today, especially Claire.
And so, Tim, as we look at what's going on in the world today, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, hurricanes, flooding, not to mention the COVID-19 pandemic, this book series has arrived at the right moment in time. One could argue that our very survival is dependent on us resetting our futures. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely, Claudette. I conceived of this series a little over a year ago when the pandemic was still in its early days. And at that time, it was still clear, first of all, that we as a planet were terribly unprepared to deal with a pandemic. And secondly, that even 3 or 4 months in, we as a species were also ready to do quite dramatic things to stop the pandemic from just sweeping over us as fast as it was coming at us. You know, whole countries locked down, whole economies ground to a halt. We changed the way we shop, we changed the way we interacted, air travel stopped. For years, we've been told, oh, we can't really do anything too dramatic about climate change because of the economy. Oh, we can't really address poverty because, ooh, you know, these are not very good economic times. It turns out when there's a crisis, we can act and can act significantly. So if we take a look at this, although there's no doubt about it, this pandemic has been a humanitarian disaster. It may be a disaster that we can learn from. One of the things that we can learn is that change, dramatic change, is possible for humanity.
And it has forced us to reset our futures, reset our thinking.
Absolutely. Well, it's given us that possibility. Now, I believe, this is the reason I did the series the way I did, that the risk is, what will happen is we'll recover from this pandemic and we'll think, oh, that was nasty, and go back to business as usual. And living in the United States, I have to tell you, I'm somewhat perturbed that the Biden campaign slogan is to build back better. Well, we all know that what was back was leading us towards catastrophic species loss, catastrophic climate change, inequality that was so unfair. People were starving, and bad inequalities on the political scale as well between nations. So going back isn't the answer. We need to not build back better, but build forward different, right?
Exactly.
And so if you look at people who are like sort of on the stage at Davos and things like that, the world has already built a platform for the rich and powerful to tell us what to do. But I'm not sure that the rich and powerful who got us into this place are the ones who will lead us out of this place. It seems rather unlikely, doesn't it? So I thought in this series, I want to bring in people who are not at the top, not leading global organizations, not the very rich, but the people who've spent their careers in the trenches, who've worked in development, who've worked in environment, who've done the nitty-gritty work, because those are the people who actually know what can be done. And I wanted to give a platform for their ideas to rise to the top and be heard. I said to the authors when I first put out the call to my networks and my networks of networks, think of this book as like an opportunity to plant your flag on a hill and show people the path to start to get there.
And before I turn it back,
challenge, I sent the call out.
And before I turn it back to Terry, I wanted to ask you one other question, Tim. What is it about Dr. Nelson's story that made you included her in this book series?
Well, when I started getting proposals in, I got some great proposals on climate change, on dealing with things like methane on different ways, and a different approach for individuals to taking personal responsibility for climate change. We've got a book on water, a book on energy, a book on reducing household waste, a book on food. But when Claire's book came in, it was on a paradigm shift for the SDGs. This was the only book that was really taking a look at the whole basket and saying, well, we really need to look differently at how we do this thing if we want to actually produce these humanitarian benefits that all of these different sustainable development goals have. We can't be doing it the way we're doing it. We're not going to get there. I agreed with her hypothesis, and I was like, okay, so what do we do? And please write a book to tell us, how can we take on this massive integrative holistic challenge in a different way? And I'm so utterly delighted that this book is now finished and will very, very soon be published. I'm so proud of the work Claire put into this. This is, although she's written all her life, this is her first published book. And I know those who've been her friends, followers, connected with her, they are waiting for this book. They're hungry for it. And I'm so delighted to be here and witness the birth, as Claire so well put it.
Thank you, Tim. Now, if you are not familiar with Dr. Nelson, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Nelson. Dr. Claire Nelson is a staple in our community. She is the author of Smart Futures for a Flourishing World, a paradigm shift for achieving global sustainability, which we are discussing at this moment. Dr. Nelson is also a futurist and White House champion of change. She is the founder and president of the Institute of Caribbean Studies, ICS. Terry, I know you're dying to grill Dr. Nelson some more, but I would like to ask Dr. Nelson a question, if you will. Dr. Nelson, you mentioned in your preface that you had to conquer fear as you answer the call to write Smart Futures. As you know, fear is a natural and powerful emotion. Can you talk a little bit about this fear that you had to overcome? And could this fear be one of the reasons why we as a people tend to ignore the obvious?
Well, there are different
say climate change,
fear.
say climate change and all that is happening in our world.
Yeah, fear can be paralyzing. I think my fear about the book was, I guess, the fear of not being taken seriously. The same fear I had when I was writing my dissertation and had a moment of extreme panic, like, what am I doing? Who told me I could do this? And then a wise person said to me, just write a couple of pages every day. And of the 600 pages, some of it must make sense. So that's how I kind of tackled my dissertation. And once, I would say Tim was very persuasive in assuring me that I was not the only person in this series that was a first-time author. By assuring me that I wasn't trying to write like, a literary genius masterpiece. I was really trying to extend my voice as an activist and advocate, and that this book would allow me to really make the stump speeches I would like to make around the world, because I told them about my passion for change, what my big dream was. And the big dream really was, how can I get the voice of a woman from the Caribbean, small island, right, representing 55 small island nations, I'd like to say, on the stage where these discussions are being had, and recognizing that most often the stage doesn't make room for people like me. But then I recall that Shirley Chisholm's thing was, well, bring your folding chair. So my book is my folding chair. It gives me the right. And I do see, and one of the things Tim also asked in sort of helping us see what our real message was, is that I feel I am the person to make this call. I represent so many types of excluded peoples that I do believe my voice is authentic. And I have earned also by my community work over the years, by my work at the Inter-American Development Bank over the years in making change. I'm a proven change maker. So this is not just based on what I call theories of change. I've actually been able to make systems change without any authority or real power. So I know that it can be done if enough of us see the vision and start to walk in that direction. So once I overcame that fear, it was all hands on deck.
Terry, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. Now, I've only got about 12 to 15 minutes, but we're going to try to use them very, very wisely. So we're going to hear a little bit about Smart Futures, the book, and what can be said about Humanitarian Day. Now, as Dr. Nelson explained to me when we first discussed the volume, the framing device for you, Dr. Nelson, was a Nancy. And of course, as Caribbean people, I would think we're all familiar with a Nancy. You came up on Nancy stories. I love that concept. So I'm going to start off a little bit of a mischievous question. What do you see of yourself in a Nancy in terms of what it is that you're delivering to your reader?
How you know me so? Well, my dears, let me tell you, when you start out to change a big system, like the Washington International Financial Development System with no authority, no job title, and no power, and you say, well, this can't work, right? You have to pull on all that is, and at the core is the Jamaican notion that we're little but we're tallow. But where does it come from? I think it comes from the embedded of the Anansi theme of being able to use a small and seemingly weak character to lever people's touch points. And so I thought that Anansi would be a good framing device, one, because we tend to look at global mythologies as only about the Greek and the Roman gods and the Norse gods, etc. And I've always thought about the mythology that we need to move into the 21st century has to move from individual cultural mythologies to a planetary mythology. So I wanted to have this planetary mythology. I've had this idea from about the 1990s, actually, when I first used Anansi on the world stage in Salzburg, at the seminars that in Salzburg, to do a story about how Anansi created world peace. And so I always wanted to use this idea of a mythology that is going to go to the cause of how we have viewed ourselves as separate beings, separate identities, separate races, cultures, classes, creeds, separate tribes. And now that we're living in a planetary society, who better than the keeper of the stories, the person who is the chief interlocutor between the gods and the humans, but Anansi, to help us make that journey. So since we have a habit of saying, is Anansi make, tiger have stripes, or Anansi make, I said, why can't Anansi make it that we save ourselves from becoming self-extinct? And so the book starts with Anansi on a mission to prove to the gods that we're worthy of being saved and prove that we will save ourselves as humans from becoming self-extinct.
To be honest, who else but Anansi? Although there's something in it for him as well.
Yeah, yes. Because it really wasn't a totally altruistic move. It was more like, first of all, if I could just read a small piece of it here.
Absolutely.
He said, well, when he heard that the gods were meeting, first of all, he wasn't invited because he's not really a god, right? He's only assistant. He convinced, so Anansi, well, as you know, Anansi is the chief interlocutor and head of human diplomacy to sky god Nyami. So when Anansi heard about the universal conclave of the pantheon of gods on earth affairs to address the Homo Deus conundrum, he decided that he just had to be there. But how? The conclave was for the gods, and he really was just a demi-semi right-hand assistant to Nyami. So Anansi had to work hard to convince Nyami that it was best for him, Nyami, to take Anansi along so that Nyami would not have to deal with the pesky details of assuring follow-up after the conclave should any action need to be taken. After all, the Nyami had so much to do that he should not have his precious time dealing with the details best left to lesser beings like he himself, Anansi. And so that is how Anansi came to be there. Crick! And you
Listen, you talk a lot. I mean, your tome is applicable globally, but with specific focus on the Caribbean. Where we are right now, it feels. I mean, we heard a little while ago from Claudette about the existential crises. It almost feels like one after the other: hurricanes, pandemic, poverty, earthquake, volcano. The hits just keep coming. What are the thoughts that you want to share about how we can move forward as a region, not just in terms of dealing with climate change, but how we move forward in terms of just dealing with everything that is upon us?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because last year when COVID hit and all of us were kind of wandering around slightly depressed, not knowing what to do, that was when this whole idea of the smart Caribbean, which really ICS has been pushing out, really took a life of its own. We decided that June Caribbean American Heritage Month in 2020, we would not just fold up and wait for things to come back to normal, but that we would press forward and we would try something new. And so we reached out to all the groups that normally have events in June and said, let's try something. Let's actually work together. It was the first. We were working across the American diaspora to put on this event. And it was the first month-long, I would say, centrally / but not quite centrally organized event, in the sense that people were doing independent things, but we tried to strategize that they would fit into each other. And we used from June 5th World Ocean Day to June Environment Day and all the days in the month to kind of flag some of the UN issues along the way. And really in the last week of June, we had for Caribbean Legislative Week, the conversation on what the smart Caribbean look like. So every event we had was about talking about the smart Caribbean future. And in those platforms, I began to try to see it. We even actually did a workshop with our core team about how strategic foresight works. How do you think about the future in a strategic way? So that I could begin to educate, first of all, those of us who are community leaders here in the region, how do we think about the future in a new way? So as we begin to make our own shift from social giving to development investors in small ways with the small farmers and community development, we can bring a new lens. So I believe that for the Caribbean to go forward beyond 2030, we need to have a new approach. First of all, we need to invest in civil society in a new way. Mm-hmm. For too long, we have relied on, I would say, outside intellectuals. We have not recognized the intellectual genius that resides even with our farmers. This is why, for example, they assume all farmers are stupid and ignorant. And so all these ways of being, which have held us back from capturing the threads of knowledge and wisdom that we need to address the complexity of our island spaces. Because even though we're small, we still have the same problems. We must eat, we must drink, we must have sewage, we must have energy, we must be transported, except it's a smaller microcosm. And because we're not, quote unquote, wealthy and powerful, we have to play like a Nancy sometimes to get what we want. But sometimes it's worked against us. So for me, I believe that the Smart Futures framework and trying to get the region to think about the Smart Caribbean context and using this book as a way of beginning to amplify the conversation, hopefully using this book to begin to convince the powers that be to allow us to do these workshops with NGO leaders, the cooperatives and the farmers, the women's organizations, the youth organizations. Because the key thing about the Smart Futures framework is that it uses the power of story to get us to the shared vision. We cannot get to a shared vision with an abstract number, such as we're told by the IMF, we're going to lower poverty by 25% of the Gini coefficient of what most of us, including myself, who has worked in the belly of that beast. I still don't understand what exactly is the Gini coefficient. So we have got to find a way to have a conversation about what is the future we want some 59 years after the first ones of us became independent in this new global environment?
Right, that's a good segue, and not to give away too much from the book, but one of the things you talk about is moving from silo thinking to systems thinking. Explain that to me, and more importantly, tell me how we make that transition.
Well, you make the questions by asking the questions. So the Smart Futures framework is about how do we ask the right questions? Silos, we all know. Any of us who have tried to do work in the region as volunteer NGOs, for example, we know we call somebody, this is not my area, call that person. You have to call 6 people first of all. And when you do call and you need to get them to work together, it's impossible because everybody hugs up their data, they hold on to their power as if to say, them and them alone can change the system. It doesn't work that way. And so I think with the universal conversation happening that first of all, the world's countries have agreed that the UN Sustainable Goals is something we should aim for. The challenge is that the region is still approaching them in the same old tired way. Let us print a book and hand out to the school children so they can read. And I have found myself in trying to convince the Jamaican authorities Let me work with young people directly and have them tell their story about their lives in 2030 and how their scholarship, their studies, their research, their new business, whatever they're doing, their family is going to add into our common story. I've met with either blank stares or, oh, where she come from with her idea. Make sure just go on about her week, because she never living in Jamaica. That is the response you get. And this is not going to take us to where we need to go. So I think the idea of the book is to get embedded in people's mind, this idea of smart futures. Be smart about the future. Ask the right questions. And the framework says, here are the 5 questions you ought to ask if you want to be smart. We should not walk around with phones that are smarter than us. You all know sometimes you're talking about something, and next thing you know, you go the ad for that things look up, and everybody say, they're listening to us, They're listening to us, So the phone's smart, the car is going to be smart, the city is going to be smart, and we be the only idiots walking around, not able to discern right from wrong, silly from stupid, and heading off the cliffs like a lemming to disaster. And so I think this approach, by using storytelling and making it very simple, nobody has to take a course in my approach. You can just ask the question.
One of the concerns, my last question as we get ready to go back to Claudette, one of the concerns, we sometimes see expressed is that people are essentially just overwhelmed. They're too busy dealing with the consequences of the last event to prepare for the next one or to prepare holistically. You talk about resilience. Where do we find hope? How do we adjust? How does the man on the street adjust our thinking for a better future?
I think that is the question that this book is trying to answer. It's saying, because we're in this moment of what I call a holy transition, we have an opportune time for leadership across the faith community, leadership across civil society, because from my perspective, I don't trust that the political elite will be the ones to take us there. And so my book, yes, of course, the book mentions the need for the political elite to play their part. But I'm saying that let us in the plural sector begin to also drive the conversation, because many politicians go account to which way the wind is blowing, right? Or if we're having a really bad time in the region, as some countries are having, they're going ahead with what they're doing because guess what? They want a sweep of the electorate. And so they control the vote, they control the narrative, they control the media, and we're just, again, heading down a way where all the things that we fought for in the 50s and 60s and the 70s and the trade union movement, and then in the democratic socialism movement of the 70s that we went through, are going to be lost. And so I do think that my book is really speaking to the individual who has a leadership role in your community. I don't care if you're a Girl Scout leader, you're a corporate sector leader, you are a Rotary Club leader. You have an opportunity, whatever program you're designing, to use these questions to frame the conversation differently and begin to have this transdisciplinary, multi-conversation, multi-stakeholder conversations necessary to design the solutions to our food problem or water problem or energy problem in a new way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. And listen, 2 things very quickly. I know Claudette is itching to take us to a break. So very quickly, 1, I can't wait to get my copy in my hand. I need it autographed, please, and thank you. I like my good old-fashioned paper books. I like to flip my pages. And 2, we could talk about this all night, I think. But I'm going to have to kick it back to Claudette. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Terry. This is Carib Nation. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we will entertain more questions with Dr. Claire Nelson. We will be right back.
All right, so what I'll do is I'll end there. I'll end the tape there, if you will. And so it kind of helped really put things in its proper, in good context, right? You need the perspective of the voices and the input of all of the stakeholders at the table as we talk about the future. What does the future look like? And as we talk about the future, what is it that we have to do to prepare for the future? And it's important to hear what are the conversations, what kind of conversations are taking place in the Caribbean region as we look at the rapid pace of technology and how technology is transformational and it's disruptive. And so clearly we see where there is we need to, as humans, as we invent these state-of-the-art advanced technology, these things are created by us, but we too have to prepare ourselves to stay not one but two but three steps ahead of the just the genius behind the things that we create. And so technology is important because technology is supposed to improve our lives. Technology is supposed to make our lives more efficient. And by improving the things that we do on a daily basis, and to be able to plan ahead and to be in sync in terms of what are the things we need to do to improve our society. That's what this conversation was about. So the future, what does the future look like? Not just for infrastructure, but the human infrastructure, right? And that's the debate you're seeing in Congress. While there's a $1 trillion, physical plant infrastructure rebuild has been, there's a bipartisan situation that came out of the Senate. It's now in the House of Representatives, and part of what the House of Representatives is saying that we need to have a reconciliation of not only the physical infrastructure, the bridges, the tunnels, the highways, the roads, the ports. We need to be able to ensure that while we create a more advanced world, a more connected world, a world that is working in a seamless fashion, that we too prepare the human element to be able to be part of that evolution, if you will. We can't allow anyone to be left behind. And so, no matter how you feel about technology is, for some people are intimidated by it, and rightfully so. I mean, technology is complex. But you notice today, right, in today's world, in today's 21st century, you notice how smart or smarter these young people are. And when I'm saying young people, I'm not even talking about teenagers. I'm not even talking about millennials. I'm not talking about those in their early 20s. I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about infants, toddlers, adolescents. They are, in terms of their mental capacity, their intelligence, they are able to navigate and they're able to discern technology better than we can. Kaysen, my sidekick Kaysen, he's my shadow, and Kaysen is 2, and Kaysen can navigate a smart device, and he knew that he was able to do that before he turned 2. He was 1 and change. And so the evolution of the human biologically, we, as we go through different centuries and different time periods, different eras, the era that we're in, we're seeing that the evolution of the human mind and how it's accelerating and how it's you're seeing a greater sense of intelligence with the younger people. And so this is important. This is important because we need to remain mindful of this. A comment here by a good friend. He's running for mayor of Atlantic City, Jimmy Whitehead. Jimmy Whitehead said, Atlantic City, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, RX5, cybersecurity, workforce training is the next global phase. Then he also said, what has he said? He said RX5 data, cybersecurity, AI infrastructure upgrades are urgently needed. And like I said, a friend of mine, he's put in his bid. He wants to be the next mayor of Atlantic City, and he's running as a Democrat. And hopefully, I want to wish him Godspeed in his effort. And obviously, I'm there for him, as to support him in any way I can. And so, but he is big on the importance of building, transforming Atlantic City, that community, that city, from a casino era to a technological era, developing, training the workforce to transition from being those people who are used to working in the casinos to now work in technology. So good thing. And obviously that's the Virgin Islands is part of that sister city relationship in terms of whether he gets elected or not. If he gets elected, great, better. We can build stronger relationship between us and Atlantic City. Atlantic City is a coastal community. We talked about a couple of shows. We've been talking about the blue economy. I presented yesterday at the Harborside Rotary. They wanted to hear in terms of the work we're doing, SETI, on what are the opportunities for the blue economy. And so clearly the opportunities are there. And so I just wanted to be able to put the voices of the stakeholders, those who have equity in the ability to help mold and shape and help shape that narrative as to what that future prospect looked like. Because again, I always say this, we're not just about, the Caribbean is not just about white sandy beaches, turquoise water, and palm trees. We got to change that narrative. We got to change that perception. And this is what this is about. And this is the work of my organization, the St. Croix Economic Development Initiative, known as SETI, and the work we're doing, and as an extension of what we need to do in terms of how we engage the rest of the region and how do we build and foster better and stronger relationship, is through the means of what we've launched, the Caribbean America's Single Economy. It is a policy position. It's a macroeconomic and public policy position to be able to align ourselves, to give us a platform, a vehicle, in order for us to be able to participate in the region and to be at the table to help mold and shape that future, that trajectory of what that future looks like for the Caribbean. And the Virgin Islands have an important role to play in that process. And so I want to make sure that we do our part. We have been absent. We've been absent for too long from the region. And so this was created. This initiative called CASE, Caribbean American Single Economy, was designed to be able to allow both public and private sector participants from the Virgin Islands to be able to engage the rest of the region regarding this opportunity. And so, thank you, Jimmy. Jimmy said, love you, and our SETI collaboration partner. Thank you, Jimmy, for that. Well, folks, that's it for me. I've come to the end of the broadcast, and I want to say thank you so much. Until next week, you stay safe and continue to do your part, and so we can continue to move and create wealth and prosperity for the region and the rest of the Caribbean. I'm Anthony Weeks, and have a good evening, folks. Thank you so much.